Hi, it's Dwyer. It is December 1st, 2025. Happy December, everyone. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, folks, I did a video on the upcoming Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul fight where I was just talking about Jake Paul's sparring partners. And my goodness, the comments in the comment section were outrageous. People saw Ben Askren hit the canvas unconscious and yet felt a need to, in the comment section, say that Jake Paul's fights were fixed. Right, folks, we know Nate Robinson had health problems after the fight. You saw Tyron Woodley hit the canvas unconscious. Folks, how do you fake a lack of consciousness? You don't think that Tyron Woodley took that second fight looking for redemption? Mike Tyson, huge name in boxing, huge. You really think that he would pass up the opportunity to beat a guy who has commercially been extremely successful in the sport? Right? This is after Tyson, of course, had fought Roy Jones already. Tyson's one of the few who sees the financial potential of older fighters returning to the ring for, one-off fights. And you really think that Mike Tyson would throw a fight against Jake Paul for what? $20 million? Folks, I know it's a lot of money to you and me. How much money did Tyson lose by losing that fight? Had Tyson beaten Jake Paul, aren't there other older fighters out there? Isn't Shannon Briggs chomping at the bit to get a fight? Aren't there other champions out there you would be interested in seeing him against? You have some fighters who everyone admits are authentic. They're current right now, who have one foot in retirement. In other words, they're telling you, I only have one or two more fights left. You don't think if Mike Tyson beat Jake Paul, he couldn't have pivoted to fight Derek Chisora to try to get credibility? Maybe even to try to extend his brand again to the United Kingdom, have the fight in the UK. Tyson, after a win against Jake Paul, against Derek Chisora, folks, that would bring in my opinion, at least 10,000 fans. So let's revisit this AJ fight because I believe the public narrative is completely ridiculous. Let me make a few points too. Understand the way public narratives work. You have a lot of people out there who are clueless. So they see the public narrative and they think, oh, let me hop on that bandwagon. So 20% believe what the public believes simply because the public believes it. Right? So let me give you some recent concrete examples. I myself looked at football, saw incredibly tough hits, right? Where guys got legs broken. The Joe Theismann injury, LT breaking his leg, right? Napoleon McCallum, if you remember that disaster. You saw guys getting knocked out. You saw guys with concussions. This is in the era where there was no tent. And we thought, you know what? When these athletes started saying, hey, I have brain injury, we thought, how could that be possible? This guy was wearing a helmet the whole time. Didn't the helmet protect the guy from injury? Right? You would look up the guy's history and you would say, oh, wow, this guy only had 2 concussions in his career. How could he be blaming football? Wasn't the only way you could get badly hurt to be when you got a concussion? Folks, now we're finding out that we didn't know jack. I'm talking about developments that have taken place, a raising of the consciousness that has taken place over the last, 20 years. Right? The world is different now. Folks, it's that way for a lot of things. So let's make a few points here. I myself believe AJ wins this fight even with the restrictions. It's an 8-round fight. He has to come in at a weight limit. Right? I still think AJ wins the fight. Right? But I'm cautioning everyone. He needs to fight the fight that he fought against Otto Wallin. Right? But I need for folks to figure out a few things here. First, AJ faces much higher expectations than Jake Paul. Right? If Jake Paul answers the bell for the start of the 6th round and the fight is viewed as credible, right? The fight is viewed as a fight where both guys came to win. Both guys gave their best effort. The referee was on the up and up. Right? If Jake Paul answers the bell for the start of the 6th round, he'll win in the court of public opinion. He will have exceeded expectations. Even if he gets knocked out in the 6th round or the 7th round or the 8th round, if he gives a good fight and the fight makes it through 5 rounds, Jake Paul is going to be viewed as being courageous. Right? People will say, hey, here's a Walter Mitty type. And he went in against a former heavyweight champion. And he made it to the 6th round. By contrast, AJ can't afford a Tyson Fury finish, where it goes to the judges, there's suspense, there are people in the sport who feel he lost the fight, the decision's not even a unanimous decision. Folks, that would be a catastrophe for AJ. That wouldn't help his brand in the slightest. So, understand one basic truth. The public has this next point completely wrong. If a fighter withdraws from this fight, chances are it will be AJ. He has much more to lose. Right? The idea of Jake Paul, who's building his brand, who knows he just has to make it to the last few rounds of the fight to be viewed as a hero. He just has to land 1 or 2 big shots and look serious and have members of the press think, man, he went for it in that 3rd round, didn't he? Right? Jake Paul is not going to withdraw. He has a brand he had to back away from, the Gervonta Davis fight, because that fight was becoming a PR nightmare, right? Given the lawsuit, the domestic violence lawsuit against Gervonta Davis. Jake Paul wants to protect his brand. He doesn't want to withdraw from this fight. Understand, too, this is the guy who is, owner of his company. This isn't a one-off fight for him. This isn't a one-off promotion for him. He has an entire business empire. Right now, he was bold enough to be in the ring against Mike Tyson. I thought Tyson was going to win that fight. I said so here online. Quite frankly, I thought Tyson would be a tougher opponent for Jake Paul than Anthony Joshua, because Tyson is around Jake Paul's height. And I thought, if they get into a shootout, Tyson is going to be able to find Jake Paul. Tyson wouldn't have to bend over, wouldn't have to master timing or anything like that. Right? Let me openly admit, I was surprised at the foot speed gap between the two guys. right? Jake Paul's already fought Mike Tyson, folks. He's not going to withdraw from this fight out of fear of Anthony Joshua. So let me just say, if a fighter withdraws and it looks sketchy, right? The fighter claims a bad back. Let's say the fighter plays the card that Daniel Dubois played to get out of the Joe Parker fight so he could go on and fight Usyk for more money. You know, the fighter could say, hey, I caught a cold, I have, respiratory problems, whatever the case may be. If a fighter withdraws and it looks sketchy, folks, it's far more likely that the fighter who withdraws is AJ. If I find this prop in a sports book and the odds are right, I'm going to take it. Let's talk about something else too. Lawrence Okolie has actually given a review of how the camp is going with Jake Paul. Folks, while Okolie isn't picking Paul to win the fight, just understand that Okolie is impressed by Jake Paul. In other words, folks, this isn't a Hollywood affair, right? This isn't like a scene out of Rocky 3 where Rocky's in training camp, but training camp is really for PR and stuff like that. This isn't Buster Douglas training in a casino where people can walk in and see him before the Evander Holyfield fight. Right? No, Jake Paul is running a real training camp. The Joshua people need to be concerned. Now let me point out that Jake Paul weighed in the 220s for the Mike Tyson fight. Look it up. Jake Paul will weigh more for this fight than the 205.5 pounds that Smoking Joe Frazier weighed for the first Ali fight. Jake Paul will weigh more for this fight than the 209 pounds that Smoking Joe Frazier weighed for the second Ali fight. I believe Jake Paul will weigh more for this fight than the 215.5 pounds that Smoking Joe Frazier weighed for the Thrilla in Manila. Everyone's looking at AJ and they're saying, come on, this is an accomplished former heavyweight champion. Right, folks? In history, you've had accomplished heavyweight champions lose to smaller opponents. Understand, when Joe Louis fought Rocky Marciano, he was the bigger man. He got knocked out the ring. I should say his head goes outside the ropes. Right? When he fought Ezzard Charles, folks, he got methodically outboxed. The people saying, oh, AJ's too accomplished to lose to a smaller fighter like this. Really? Hasn't this happened to other champions? Hasn't this sport given you Jess Willard losing badly to Jack Dempsey? Folks, we'll overlook the fact that you have, a middleweight who jumped to heavyweight and won the heavyweight championship. That's Bob Fitzsimmons, one of Roy Jones's favorite fighters. We'll overlook the fact that you had a middleweight fighting a heavyweight champion and knock him down. That's the great Stanley Ketchel. Look him up. Early death, unfortunate, outside the ring. Right? A lot of drama there. Learn the fighter. Right, folks? The heavyweight champion, Tommy Burns, who Jack Johnson beat for the title, entered the ring weighing 168.5 pounds. Understand, Tommy Burns, who was a puncher, won the heavyweight title in a fight in which he weighed 175 pounds. Now, here, what am I supposed to believe? that AJ is too big for Jake Paul? Folks, size can actually be a detriment. Don't you think? Haven't you seen fights where the bigger guy looks big and clunky and can't quite keep up with the smaller guy? Right? Let me say too, AJ, slow starter. Right? I would argue he's a slow starter. I know there are a group of you saying, what about the Francis Ngannou fight? AJ has his moments. But AJ typically reads the lay of the land in the early rounds, doesn't he? This is not Moses Atama. Right? Let me talk directly to fans of British heavyweight boxing. Otama is like a microwave compared to AJ. Right? Otama is the guy who, Dillian White, if he had a watch and we're looking at the watch, would look at that watch less than 90 seconds before being in significant trouble. That's not AJ, folks. I'm extremely impressed by AJ's win over Otto Wallin. But let's get the dynamic right here. Otto Wallin, tall guy. One of the best athletes in the heavyweight division. But I would argue that Otto Wallin can't get as low, doesn't move as well as Jake Paul. Right? Jake Paul's going to come in. All he has to do in the early rounds is move away, plant some entry points, come in, have a hand up to guard against one of AJ's hands, throw a flurry, get back out. If he does that 3 times in the first round, it'll be viewed as credible. He doesn't have to stay in the pocket. Now let's ask some difficult questions here. We've just lived through this fight. At what point in the AJ versus Daniel Dubois fight did AJ's defense start to degrade? Folks, it was early. Right? Understand, there are certain guys who can move and who are defensively minded. Right? A masterpiece, in my opinion, Mayweather, Floyd Mayweather Jr., right, versus Marquez. Right? Mayweather is circling Marquez. He's jumping into the pocket. When he jumps in the pocket, his chin is hidden. Of course, he's a defensive master. But let's just say you could pick any round of that fight, and you would say, wow, Mayweather's defense was top-notch. Right? That's a different Mayweather than the one who opens up a bit against Canelo, is daring Canelo to hit him. Right? The Mayweather against Marquez is defensed up. Folks, Anthony Joshua isn't defensively blessed. Right? He, is making mistakes